from the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast.
A hurricane heads for the coast of Texas. On the crop tour,
USDA says Minnesota's condition for corn and soybeans rate higher than the I states. Could Minnesota have a bumper crop? And I'm currently standing in what's considered the garden spot of Iowa. So just how good are crops here? We'll have that story coming up today on Ag Day.
in agribusiness, tax tips.
And so to some degree, the answer we're giving our farmers what they should do now is almost nothing.
And remembering a major storm from 25 years ago.
Ag Day, presented by the Chevy Silverado. High-strength steel for high-strength dependability.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. It's been 142 months since a major hurricane struck the continental United States, and this morning, the Texas Gulf Coast is bracing for a direct strike from Harvey. The U.S. National Hurricane Center says Harvey is likely to intensify as it moves over warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico and deliver heavy rain to parts of eastern Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. Rain accumulations of 10 to 15 inches are expected over the middle and upper Texas coast and southwest Louisiana through next Tuesday. Some places could see even more, up to 25 or 30 inches of rain.
Our biggest concern right now is this is not your typical type of storm, and it's not going to be your typical type of flood event. For most storms, the problem is wind and storm surge. While those could be problems here, the biggest issue really is this is going to be a big flooding event.
Cotton farmers in Texas are rushing to get as much of the crop harvested as they can ahead of the storm. One farmer telling our partners at AgWeb they estimate roughly 50% of the crop in that region is left in the field and 90% of that is ready to harvest. The threat to cotton has futures rallying, some contracts climbing more than 50 cents Thursday. Heavy rains are likely to hurt quality long term. USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey says it's been an active season so far.
So we have had a very active start. There have only been 3 years that have had similar active starts with this many named storms by the middle part of August. And each of those three ended up being extremely active years all the way through.
Rippey says anytime there's an active tropical pattern in the Atlantic off the coast of Africa like this season, he's watching steering currents to see if they'll push tropical storms into the Gulf. Speaking of rain, heavy rains in the upper Midwest helping blunt long-term drought. The latest drought monitor showing improvements this week, especially in the Dakotas, Nebraska, and western Iowa. 44% of Iowa now classified as drought-free. Last week, it was just 29%. Nebraska also seeing improvements following rainfall totals of more than 5 inches in the eastern half of the state. However, drought conditions intensified in Montana once again. 91% of that state now in some level of drought.
Coverage of the 2017 Farm Journal Midwest Crop Tour is brought to you by DuPont Pioneer, with you from the word go.
The 2017 Midwest Crop Tour is now in the books as the ag industry anxiously awaits the final national yield numbers from our partners over at Pro Farmer. We do have the full results from tour scouts in Illinois. This year, teams report an overall average corn yield of 180 bushels to the acre. Now that's down compared to last year and off 7 bushels from the 3-year average. Soybeans coming in lower as well at 1,230, nearly 40 pods lower than the 3-year average in a 3 by 3 foot square. In Monday's Crop Progress Report, USDA estimates 82% of the state's corn condition and 74% of its soybean crop was rated good to excellent. Both ratings are higher than each of the 3 I states. Betsy Gibbon finds out Minnesota's crop may be this year's garden spot.
Some Minnesota farmers have it pretty good this year.
June was great. July, we had good pollination. July, right in our area, we had excessive rain.
Minnesota lake farmer Ken Eckhart says for him, those rains did not come all at once.
Some of the crops that are a little wetter ground are starting to struggle a little bit. We need heat and we need sunshine.
And farmers like Eckhart will tell you, it's not a secret the state has the potential to produce a good crop.
Well, I don't think it'll be a crop like we had last year, but it's going to be very close. It's going to be a bumper crop, yes it is.
And scouts on the tour say they see that good crop too when it comes to corn.
Our route's been strong on corn. 7.
Judish's route took him through Martin and Wanatan counties, and even fields with issues.
Lodging, the corn is down really bad. I have not seen a field this bad all year.
Still sample a nice yield.
We've been running from 181 to 201, which is very good for Minnesota. I think USDA was 183.
But beans are different.
Normally this part of Minnesota we'll see at least 1,000 pods. A lot of times 11 and 1,200 pods. 3x3 this year we've seen 852 has been the high. The low has been 600. That's 30% less than what we expect to see.
Judas says that's due to lack of beans on the plant and population.
We should have 5 and 6 clusters. In this plant, we only have 1 3-bean cluster. Everything else are 2-bean clusters.
Despite a very promising crop, farmers like Eckhart know a frost could quickly change it.
So our crop is behind because of the cool weather. We're probably 2 weeks behind, and an early frost would really hurt us.
Minnesota farmers hope one of the only areas of the Midwest which received good weather this year will continue to see it into harvest. Reporting in Minnesota, I'm Betsy Gibbon.
All right, thanks, Betsy. As the drought monitor showed us, moisture conditions improved this week in parts of the western corn belt, but the moisture may have come too late to help Iowa's corn crop. Tyne Morgan has details from the road. Tyne?
Yeah, Clinton, we know parts of Iowa are dry, and while most of the state could really use a drink right now, farmers in the east are surviving the roller coaster of Mother Nature better than farmers in the west this year.
These beans are actually planted June 3rd.
For West Liberty, Iowa farmer Austin Moss,
We're potted really well here. We're getting some good pod fill.
soybeans are showing strong promise this year.
So we got a good pod count here. We'd definitely like to see a little more rain to fill these top pods out.
Despite dry conditions parked across Iowa, these fields are turning out good crops in 2017.
We're sitting really good. I feel we're in a garden spot.
He says rains in July replenish the soil, meaning they've been able to handle the recent dryness better than some. But you don't have to travel far to run into trouble spots.
We're looking about 35 miles southwest of here is where some problems start. And of course, when you get south of here, there's some lighter soil profiles, and they're hurting if it's not under irrigation.
Moss escaped the worst of it this year, but even this garden spot of Iowa,
We've got good kernel length, good kernel depth.
doesn't look to produce record yields this year.
Nice.
But just west of Iowa City,
Wow.
beans are bountiful,
It's a bush, man.
with pod counts catching pro farmers Brian Grady by surprise.
It's heavily potted. I mean, look how thick the stem is, the potting, that's incredible.
But incredible beans wasn't the case in every field.
Really, it's the number of pods. Did they get the moisture at the right time? Those fields that did, we get good pod counts out of. Those that didn't, the pod counts are disappointing.
Even with light rains on Thursday, these fields need more moisture to fill out and finish strong. It was corn showing scars of dryness.
Can't even support the weight of the rope.
Impacting grain length
This field's tipped back here, good 2.5 inches or so.
and yield.
Biggest surprise is that we haven't had any really high yielding fields.
Which means Iowa's crop is good, but not a bin buster.
I would say just in general, it's not the crop that the producer wanted when they got the seed in the ground this spring. And you know, last year's crop was huge, both on corn and soybeans. I think that we're short of that, and USDA told us that with their August estimate.
Reporting from eastern Iowa, I'm Tyne Morgan for AagDay.
Mike Hoffman has his own survey of crops in this morning's Crop Comments. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Clinton. We talked about drought improvement in Iowa and Nebraska, but Illinois was downgraded somewhat. The drought monitor shows 6% of Illinois is now in D1 or moderate drought. It was just 1% last week, and the area of Illinois under abnormal dryness also expanded this week, as the Scouts on Crop Tour can attest to. Illinois has been out of drought most of this growing season. Taking a look at that drought monitor, you can see it stretches from central Illinois all the way into eastern Montana, where it continues to be the worst spot in the country, eastern portions of Montana. We'll talk more about the drought monitor and have your forecast coming up. First, here are some hometown temps.
DuPont Pioneer is auctioning off a Timty Super Hopper grain trailer, and all proceeds benefit the FFA. Register to bid at pioneer.com/chrome. That's pioneer.com/QROME.
All right, can Congress get together on tax reform yet this year? We have a tax expert up next with some ideas on what to watch and how to prepare. And we visit a storm that's still creating bad memories 25 years later.
Join Market Rally host Chip Flory live from the Ravo AgriFinance booth at this year's Farm Progress Show, August 29th through the 31st.
Paul Neiffer is our guest here at the Agribusiness Desk today. He's a principal with Clifton Larson Allen and a tax expert. Of course, tax is always an important topic, and whenever you're running a business, let's talk about what we should be doing right now this time of year and throw in some of the possible reforms that we may be experiencing this year.
You know, we know right now there's a big six in D.C. There's a couple from the House, a couple from the Senate, and a couple from President Trump that are trying to meld all these competing tax reform ideas together. And likely if we're going to have something, it's going to be September, October of this year, could go all the way to the end of the year. If it doesn't happen by the end of this year, it's probably not going to happen because there's a midterm election next year. And so to some degree, the answer we're giving our farmers what they should do now is almost nothing. You know, it's a case of until we really know exactly what Congress is going to do, it's hard to make those big decisions. That's why hopefully we get something here fairly soon. What we can tell our farmers, we know that Section 179 is still there at the $510,000 level. We know that bonus depreciation is there, so if they're building a new building of any type, any farm property automatically qualifies for a 50% deduction in the year that they build it. So that's always nice. So those things are there. All of our other sort of arrows in our tax quiver, so to speak, they're all still available. Farmers can defer their cash sale into next year, and so that allows them, if they want to report the income this year, they can, or they can report it next year. Normally they would report it next year. So I think tax policy is sort of like making sausage. You know, when we get the final product, we're maybe okay with it, but as far as how it's made, it's just a mismatch of back and forth among all those parties. But I think the key for farmers is be talking to their advisors, come up with some plans that if this part of tax reform happens, then we want to go this way. If this part of tax reform happens, then we want to go the other way.
All right, so those are some things that we kind of be thinking ahead here and be prepared, because more than likely it's going to happen at the worst possible time, right?
Yeah, we can go back to 3 years ago. It happened on basically the last day of the year and signed like January 2nd of the following year. So it could conceivably go all the way till the end of the year.
All right, something to watch. All right, appreciate it. Thank you. We'll be back with more AagDay in just a minute. Back to AagDay, your meteorologist Mike Hoffman. Mike, as we look at the drought monitor here, there's a couple spots where we saw improvement, but overall the northern plains still pretty dry long term.
Yeah, it really is, especially long term and back into eastern portions of Montana. But when you just take a look at the lower 48 as a whole, that's very little drought for a typical year. You can still see those areas in Iowa and, like we said, the northern plains in eastern Montana. But when you look at the eastern Corn Belt, the southeast, the southern plains, little, if any, drought anywhere across that area. Going back 4 weeks and progressing eastward, you can see we have seen some improvement like we talked about in Nebraska and even South Dakota, but we've seen big time improvement in much of Oklahoma, northern Texas. Those areas have continued to improve as we've moved through the last 3 to 4 weeks. And there's where we are right now. Again, just not a major area, but obviously if you live in one of those areas, it's not pleasant. All right, Hurricane Harvey. Yeah, coming on shore. Now, our computer model has come farther north than it was yesterday, but it's still farther south than the National Hurricane Center. But the National Hurricanes forecast has come much farther southeast. So we're going to see. I think it's going to be south central Texas that gets the bulk of the rain out of this system. And here's the whole problem. As this comes inland, it looks like there's just no steering currents, which means wherever it comes in, it's going to go in a couple of counties and then stall. And that could be terrible because some areas could just get a couple feet of rain or more, something we'll have to watch. Also, a pretty good area of low pressure moving across Florida. Other than that, not a whole lot going on. We do have this slow moving system in the northern plains producing some areas of showers and storms. Otherwise, big dome of high pressure Great Lakes into the northeast, keeping things on the cool side. So let's check the precipitation estimate past 24 hours. You can see some decent amounts in parts of New Mexico too. And then as we bring Harvey in, our computer model is showing over a foot of rain, and obviously that could double that over a 48 or a 4 or 5 day period, let's say. Southern Florida also getting a whole bunch of moisture. High temperatures today, only 60s. across the Great Lakes in the Northeast, 60s and 70s, let's say. The real hot, humid stuff is all the way down to the Gulf Coast. Lows tonight in the 40s and 50s in the Great Lakes in the Northeast. Highs tomorrow more of the same. Lots of 60s and 70s showing up in that area. That's all because of that trough that's moving through the Northeast. You can see how things relax a little bit, but we still have this troughiness over the Great Lakes in the Northeast and the ridge out west. Things may start to change a little bit as we head into later next week toward Labor Day weekend. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. First of all, Sheridan, Wyoming, a mixture of clouds and sunshine, thunder shower possible in spots, high of 87. Rockdale, Texas, cloudy and humid, and afternoon rain and wind setting in, high of 89. And Springfield, Ohio, lots of sunshine, high around 73.
You planted the seeds, but is it going to make any grain? We'll do stand count with Missy Bauer next on Farm Journal College TV. Plus, as Texas prepares for a massive storm, we remember a monstrous storm that still stirs violent memories more than 2 decades later. On Farm Journal College TV, field agronomist Missy Bauer joins us to explain how to know if you're hitting the mark ahead of harvest.
Well, what we're trying to do here is some of our pre-harvest scouting.
Yeah.
So one of the big things we want to do is get an idea of where's our ear count actually end up here before harvest. Not that we change anything for this year, but it's really to help me make better decisions for next year. Well, part of what I'm after is how many plants per acre do I have compared to ears per acre.
Okay.
So what's my loss between plant count and ear count? Every 1,000 ears per acre is worth 5 to 7 bushel.
All right.
So in this case here, you know, I've lost an entire ear here where there's no ear, but there's a plant.
Sure.
So in my thousandths of an acre I have marked out here, I just lost 5 to 7 bushel with this plant acting this way when you compare it across. Here's another real small ear here because it's a double drop or 2 plants spaced too close together, an issue here with the planter itself.
Yeah, and you would count, let's say we have ears that look like this, you would count both of these, right?
Yeah, so when you're thinking about, you know, what do we really mean by ear count? Sure, both of these are ears that are going to get harvested.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at the individual plant yield here, this ear is much larger than what I have here. And it cost me the same amount to produce on a plant this year as it did this year. So I really want to reduce these small looking ears. You can see another example here. It's a very small ear when you start to compare it to the ears that are around it.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm going to get it harvested, but probably not a full ear. So in my ear count, I'd probably give this about a half of an ear. So when you're looking at your counts, you can kind of start judging some things. We try to encourage growers that when you're doing your ear counts, where should you end up? If you're in a corn bean rotation, we think that your plant count compared to your ear count should on average be about within 1,200 of one another.
Okay.
Any more loss than that, we think that's too much. If you're in corn on corn or dealing with a lot of heavy residue, then we'd say 2,000 ears per acre should be your limit. No more loss than that, otherwise we think we're just leaving too many dollars on the table.
When we come back, reflecting on a storm that still lives on in the minds of its survivors.
In the Country, brought to you by Kubota's M5 series, bringing new levels of comfort to hard work. Learn more at Kubota.com or visit your local Kubota dealer today.
As Texas prepares to face the onslaught of a storm named Harvey, we also want to recognize the anniversary of a major hurricane that hit a quarter-century ago in South Florida. It was 25 years ago when Hurricane Andrew slammed into southern Florida, nearly wiping the city of Homestead from the map with its 175-mile-an-hour winds. Andrew was one of the few Category 5 hurricanes ever to hit the U.S. More than 65,000 homes were destroyed, 65 people died, and the damage estimates were as high as $26 billion. Until Katrina, Andrew was the costliest natural disaster ever in the United States. Now, thousands of acres of mangroves snapped like toothpicks. One of the ag research facilities owned by the University of Florida took a direct hit from that storm in 1992. It's where tropical fruit studies are conducted. The university says winds toppled entire groves of mangoes, avocados, and papayas. It took years for the groves to be reestablished. Researchers say as a result of the storm, they shifted their focus on how different fruit crops react and recover to hurricane-force winds. An unbelievable story 25 years ago this week. That's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. Start your day with us. For Tyne, Betsy, and Mike, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day in farm country.
AagDay is powered by Ram Trucks, America's longest lasting pickups.